I love defacing books. What can I say? I'm just a monster by all intents and purposes. Maybe. Do I enjoy it? I do. Annotation, writing in books, defacing copies, tabbing the books, underlining. These are all different concepts that you guys constantly ask me about, which all is basically summed up in how do you annotate your books? And so today I thought I'd come on here and basically give you guys an updated how do I annotate my books. I did one of these installments last year. I'll leave it linked down below in case you guys do want to check it out. However, my annotation system has changed quite a lot since last year. Not only because last year I was just getting started into annotating, so I didn't really decipher some sort of system for myself. I was just kind of trying out a bunch of different elements thrown into different books. But now I've kind of just embraced that books are going to be annotated differently depending on what genre it is, exactly what I'm looking for as I'm annotating. But there is some continuous thread between all of the books that I annotate, and that is the system of it itself, why I underline, what I'm underlining, what I'm looking for as I read, and what tools do I use now. So today I'm gonna go over all of those details, why I annotate, how I annotate, what tools do I use to annotate, why maybe you should start annotating, and if you're a beginner, what I recommend you doing to start out in your journey. Examples of books that I've annotated lately that I can show you guys, and the ones that I'm gonna go over in this video, are all three of these books, and I've kind of sectioned this off by like beginner, intermediate, and advanced, if that makes sense, though judge that how you will. I'm just calling that for the purpose of showing you guys different levels of annotation. So the first one would be something like All's Well, and I'm gonna go into these later. A second example and a sort of level up would be something like The Final Empire, which is the first book in Mistborn Era 1 by Brandon Sanderson, and most recently I have Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong, and I also have something extremely easy, which is the example of Scythe, which I believe I showed you guys on my last video as well. So those four books are going to be my example for this video, and getting into the first portion as to why I annotate. I am first and foremost a visual learner. Yes, I can listen to audiobooks, and yes, I can retain a lot of information through my ears, but most of what I learn is when I am just plainly seeing it with my eyes. And to enhance that experience, I use annotation as a way to take notes, as you would in school, basically, and basically have this thought log, if you will, where I make sure to record every reaction, every question, every foreshadowing, every red herring, every plot twist, every piece of world building and characters and important moments. That way when I'm making a review, I can better remember exactly what I read, key points that I want to bring up in reviews, or key points that I want to use to sell a book, or that I want to use when I'm making a video for you guys. I am also one of the individuals that wholeheartedly believes that when you buy a book, it is yours and you are free to do with it whatever you want to do, whether that is, I mean, I don't know why you'd rip pages out, but if you want to fold pages, rip pages, paste stuff on the book, if you want to write on it, underline it, highlight it, whatever it is that you want to do in your own copy, you're free to do so, and that only gives the book a lot more personality. It's almost like an interaction between you and the book, and that's mostly the way that I look at it. It almost feels like I am reacting, responding to these characters, that I am trying to some way, somehow influence what's happening in the story, even though I have no say or control, but it still feels like a little bit more of an intimate experience, and I personally like to do it. I don't do it with every single book, I just do it with a book that gives me the feeling, if we will, or a book that I'm using for a live show, for a book club, that I really kind of have to write down my thoughts to remember things, but otherwise I mainly just do it when I see a really good quote, a really good passage, or something that I see that I go, oh shit, I need to remember this by the end of the book. And so I think when it comes to the why I annotate books, I think that pretty much covers it. There's just something wholly intimate and personal as to the reason why I do it beyond the learning part of it, and it's almost like the sort of introduction, I guess, to the books into my library. I have a lot of books that are not annotated because they've not given me that feeling, but I just know that the books that are annotated are 10 times more special to me, and that's just something that I can lend to a friend and they can see my thoughts. Or if I were ever to not want to reread a book that is part of a series, I can just go through my notes, flip back through the book and see my reactions. Or if I've picked up a book, not finished it, and I want to pick it back up without starting wholly from page 1, I can just flip through those annotations and it'll take me on the ride that I need. And before I actually jump into the portion of how I annotate, let's talk about what I use to annotate and why I've chosen these tools in particular. First and foremost, when it comes to the most important thing of annotating for me, those are the tabs. Now, the tabs for me are something that are very versatile in the sense that you can use these and pair this with a pen or a highlighter that you can use in conjunction in order to annotate, or if you kind of just want to to color coordinate your thoughts without the necessity of writing in your books, you can do so just with the tabs themselves, and that is also a great way to keep a track of your thoughts. Now, I've bought both of these sets and I've used them and loved them both. This is the one that I started out with. It's simple and it's got 7 colors, which is a great way to start with, because when you're starting out, you may just need 1 color or 2 colors or 3 colors. You may not use all 7. And that is also the beauty of annotating, is that you can use 1 color for the entirety of the book, or you can also color coordinate the way that I do. But now I've been using this set right here just because it gives me a wider range of things to annotate, and it's also easier to section my thoughts off in a way where they're now even easier to find versus this, which felt a little bit limiting to me after I got way into annotating. There's also sets like these, which shout out to Nani. I'll be leaving her linked down below. She's a bookstagrammer. She's stunning. Her feed is literally, chef's kiss, and she literally uploaded a reel all about how she annotates her books as well. And she had this very muted toned tab set that I absolutely fell in love with, and I just had to have it myself. I haven't used this yet in a book, so I don't know how it looks on pages, because the other ones are very transparent and plasticky, so that means that they won't bend and it's still see-through enough. So these ones I couldn't attest to, but if you wanted a little bit more of a different color range, this is also something that you could find at Amazon, or I'm sure any other sort of store that you have in the place that you live. I will also make sure to leave all of these linked down below, by the way, in case you guys want to check any of these out. Then very simple post-its. Post-its, post-its, post-its of all colors and sizes. Quite literally, I love these. And also, again, if you don't want to write in your books, this is also a great way to color coordinate, or just use 1 color in general to write down your thoughts and paste them in the book in a way where you don't really have to deface the copy itself. And if you were ever to give the copy away, you can just take away the tabs, take away the post-its, and the book is just like new. Longer post-its are also my friends, not every time, but sometimes. If, let's say, I want to make a little summary at the end of every 100 pages, this is not something that I came up with myself. This is something that I saw Chloe from Books with Chloe do, and I found it really interesting, and so I've done it to a few books, particularly books that I've used for live shows. I think that's when it comes really handy. Every 100 pages or so, I kind of just catalog all of my thoughts and have it in a single post-it at the end of the 100 pages, and I read another 100, and I paste another 1 or 2, and that is again something that I do every once in a while, but not with every book. Sorry you guys, I had to take a small break because my boba got here, and here's the vibe. And now for like the controversial part of it, I guess, because I know a lot of people don't like actually writing in their books, and I've got like a lot of people telling me like, why do you write in your book? And I'm like, because I love it. I love it. I absolutely love it. So for the 3 main pens that I use for annotating, there are 2 sorts of pens and then a highlighter set. For the pens, I use the Stabilo ones. I found that these are incredible. They last for a long time. Even when I've got like Bible thin paper, like yes, it'll bleed through because that's inevitable, but also it's not that noticeable. So it's not something that I particularly mind, but just be wary that if you are getting these and you read a lot of longer books that have really thin paper, this might bleed through just a tiny little bit. But a really good alternative for those, which are other ones that I use for paper that is really, really thin and that actually bleeds through, are the Papermate Inkjoy pens, because these are just ballpoint pens. These are not gel ink, meaning that they'll still be super opaque. They're super smooth to write with, but they won't bleed through your page, which I love. For my pen, I switched to the Uniball Signo just because I wanted something that wouldn't skip. I wanted something that the ink would be really noticeable, something that didn't look grayish, and a pen that would just last me a really long time. And also I'm kind of biased that I personally prefer how my handwriting looks with this pen, so I just have switched to this one and I haven't looked back. There's a bunch of huge bundles of this pen on Amazon for like super cheap, so I literally got a massive set of like 24 pens or something for like $10 or maybe less, I can't be sure, but I have been using this religiously and I just love how this looks on my books. It looks so good. And for the highlighters, who would I be if I didn't have mild liners? Now these ones are super nice. I have used other ones like Bic and Stabilo and other really common brands for highlighters. However, what's cool about these ones is that yes, they're opaque, but they end up coming across as very pastel-like on the page, so they don't bleed through as much as other regular highlighters. And the distribution of ink, for as weird as that sounds as like a pro for this, but I guess that is sort of a massive pro for this, the distribution of ink is super even. Now getting into the how I annotate my books, the first thing and the most important thing is again the tab order, my universal tabbing system, if you will. It is kind of simple to me now that I've grown used to it, but it could also seem very convoluted to other people. So for the colors, we have have this lilac shade right at the top. When it comes to that particular shade, I use this for anything that could signify foreshadowing for me. If I'm trying to guess what's happening in a fantasy book or a thriller or a sci-fi, I will put that shade in and kind of annotate my theory. Or if I think it's a red herring, all of that qualifies under that color. Pink is pretty universal. It is any moment I love, any romance, any interaction that's fantastic, writing that really resonated with me, anything that could be encompassed by the big umbrella of love. The dark purple beneath that is themes and triggers for me. Any themes stated and addressed in the book, whether that's racism, classism, colorism, corruption, whatever it might be, something that's really important and prevalent in the plot, I will tap it with that particular shade. Or if it's any sort of trigger warning that's actually really important to know before walking into the book, I will also classify that as a dark purple. Blue, I think, is pretty much self-explanatory. Anything that's sad, anything that's moved me, anything that just made me go, oh my god, with that face. Light green for me is mostly world building, so anything to do with magic systems or world building or character building, character development. Or dark green, it is a longer note that I have. A note on writing, a note on character, a note on plot, a note on world building. It is basically kind of like a very lengthy talk back to the book. So it could be a really big post-it or a post-it in general, something that I really want to bring up in a review that's just an opinion. It doesn't really catalog itself under any other color, but this is my opinion. For yellow, self-explanatory, it's shocking. Then we've got orange, which is interchangeable with light green for me. That could also signify world building. We've got this super like pastel, almost beige color, and that to me is mad. Whenever I'm pissed off, want to punch someone, I'm just really mad at something that happened, I will put that tab in. And last but not least, when it comes to red, that also works hand in hand with anything to do with world building, character development, but that is basically that, but enhanced. It's basically extra important information that I cannot, will not, do not forget, Mel. I tap that as red, and I tap it as red because it kind of jumps out when it's in the book, and it's kind of like, oh shit, okay, red, Mel, you say you wanted to remember this for the review. Let's open the page and let's see what this is about. And again, tabbing to me will manifest itself differently depending on the book and what sort of emotion it evokes from me. So one of my first few books that I annotated was Scythe. Scythe is a book that I was super scared to annotate because I didn't really know what I was looking for. So I used a super simple tabbing system, took away a bunch of colors, and just tabbed kind of the main ones. So I tapped things that I loved, things that shocked me, world building, things that made me mad, and things that made me sad. It only had 5 or 4 colors, I think, so it was super simple, and I didn't even write on the book. It's just post-its over and over again with my thoughts and theories, but not really writing in the book itself. So this is an example of something that if you guys wanted to get into annotating, something that's super achievable, attainable, you don't need a lot of materials, and it's something that you can start leveling up with. So let's say if you start out with post-its and then want to move on to actually writing in your books, you don't need to start out with pen. You can literally do that with pencil and kind of erase and take away however you see fit. I also have other books, I think Cemetery Boys is one of those, and also Throne of Glass are books that I didn't annotate with pen, but I rather annotated with actual pencil, that I could erase it if I ever regretted my decisions with annotated at the time. Something like All's Well is also an option where I actually tapped this with most of my regular system, but when I actually look inside of the book, everything is underlined and I have all of my thoughts with pen jotted down into the book. There are pages that have several tabs to catalog different emotions, to catalog different things that I wanted to remember, but this is kind of a step up of that. When you've gone through the pencil, when you've gone through the post-its, you can tab as you would, but then you can color coordinate with a pen or a highlighter, and then again record your thoughts with pen on the actual book. This is one of my favorite systems to use because it's very simple, but it also allows me to keep it all in a single place, meaning that if I ever want to address something or I want to reference a certain page or quote or anything of the sort, I have it all in a single place and I know which tab, which page to go to. Something like The Final Empire was when I started getting a little bit more experimental with my tabbing. So again, on the side, I have my regular sort of tabbing system. If I flip through the book, there are moments that have post-its, there there are moments that just have underlining or highlighting and me actually writing in the book. So it's like all over the place, but I kind of understand what I mean, if that makes sense. And then because this book had so much meatiness on it, as Sanderson books tend to have, I decided to make a subsection to my annotation, meaning that I would annotate normally on the side, but everything that I put on the top tab-wise still means the same. So it means love, world building, important details, notes, etc. But if it's at the top, it means that they're extra important, and those are all of the points that I want to highlight in a video, live show, review, etc. So it's kind of the same but enhanced. Does that make sense? I feel like in my head it makes sense, where if I wanted to reference extra important points, they're all up here instead of up here, and it kind of gave me a better division instead of all the tabs getting lost in each other. And this is a tabbing system that I really liked for high fantasy. And then for my latest book that I annotated, I have Our Violent End by Chloe Gong. This is a book that I decided to tab a little bit differently. So it boils down to kind of the same system as The Final Empire, but with post-its. And instead of having them in the top, I just have it all in one place. So the tabbing system in its entirety means the same of what I typically use, the universal tabbing system. And then I color coordinated post-it to say this is a moment that I extra loved, a moment that I want to remember, a moment that if I were to flip through the book and see what were those key moments that made me go, I love this book, where I was mad at this book, or this world building is fantastic, or this commentary was out of this world, I can just reference a post-it and know that those moments really did it for me. And so I guess it's a more complicated way of doing what I did with Final Empire, because you would need the added element of post-its, which is absolutely unnecessary. So if you wanted to do this, you could literally just do it as I did the Final Empire, because at the end of the day, it means the same thing. I just did it with different elements and in different parts of the book. Other things that I've done in the past, like I previously mentioned, is that every 100 pages or so, I'd go in with a post-it and write down most of my main big reactions to that 100 pages. And that is also a really nice way to organize my thoughts. And other things I've done in the past that I personally don't do anymore, but to kind of go over them, that I did talk about in that first annotation video, is that I used to grab a post-it or a piece of paper where I'd write down my annotation key for that particular book. Again, because annotation systems kind of change depending on the book, that is something that you can do to kind of remind yourself of when you read the book, what rating you gave the book, for what purpose you read the book, if it was just for pure enjoyment or for a book club or for a read-along, and what colors mean exactly what. That is also something that I used to do, but now I kind of do the same thing over and over again, and I know what each book means because it's so special. For as weird as that sounds, I literally remember every tabbing system for every book. I don't know why my brain retains this stuff, but it does. But that is something that you could also do when you're getting started in your journey. Things I've also done in the past is paste a whole sheet of paper on the actual end paper of the book, and I've written down all of my favorite quotes, my favorite characters, my rating, trigger warnings, to kind of keep it all in a single place. Again, this is mostly for reviewing / enjoyment purposes, and this is something that is absolutely extra. Like, if you think annotation is extra, like, this is just like a whole other level. So that is something that is not mandatory, but it's also something that you can add to your books. But the most important thing about annotation is really just to have fun with it. Make sure that you build your own system, find out what works for you, and just start building up if it's something that you want to start doing. Like, just because I use a bunch of different post-its and a bunch of different tabs and I write in my books doesn't mean that you have to do it as well. It's literally just something that I personally do and that you guys constantly ask me about, like, how do you do it? Like, can you share your tips and tricks? And that is basically how my system works. And if you want to fit that into your personal reading life, then fantastic. Or if you want to grab key elements of this video and adapt that to your reading style, then that's also absolutely fantastic. I also get this question a lot of, Mel, if you annotate books, doesn't it take you longer to read the book? Twice the amount of time, 3 times the amount of time? Sometimes it does, depending on the book. But I think if anything, there's just something about the way that I annotate that sometimes feels so frantic and so chaotic that kind of makes me read books faster sometimes. And so it'll wholly depend on the experience. And while yes, sometimes it can take a little bit longer to get through the book because of annotating, it is most times not the case. It does not slow down my process in the slightest. And if anything, if it comes to that, it'll help me remember the book even better if I do take longer. And so those are all of the things that I can think about right now. I hope I'm not leaving anything out. If I do, I'll kind of re-edit this in a way that makes sense. But I hope that all of the key details are here. I hope everything came across super clear as to how I annotate, why I do it, what tools do I use, and just answer that very common question of, like, does it take you longer? No, it doesn't. I know that annotating can be quite intimidating because of writing in your books portion, but also because if you look at all of the tools, it's like, oh my god, the experience will get even pricier. And it doesn't really need to come to that because most tab sets really just bring a lot of tabs. And if you want to use one single color for the entirety of the book, probably run through tabs a lot slower than I personally do. Or if you're working on a smaller budget, you don't need to use all of the tools in order to annotate. Annotating does not mean having a million pens or a million highlighters or a million post-its. Annotating is an extremely personal experience, so whatever that means to you, that is the most important part of it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope everything came across as super clear. If you have any other questions on annotating, make sure to leave them down in the comments. If you have your own annotation systems, let me know down below, because that may also help other people who are trying to get into this journey themselves. And if you have any takes on annotating, also let me know that down below, because maybe there are some of you who are like wholly against annotating, and I'd love to have a conversation about that too if there are some of you that are within that stance. Let's just chat down in the comments all things annotation. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to smash that like button down below and subscribe down below for more content if you wish to do so, because we constantly have videos going up over here. If you want to support the channel further, I do have a Patreon. We call ourselves the Citadel, and that is always linked down below alongside all of my social medias. And yes, I love you guys so much, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye guys.